Welcome to Equity Builds Expertise, the podcast. Because whether you teach it or build it, expertise grows where equity leads. I'm Shauna Pyatt Buckner, STEM educator, consultant, author, and voice behind the Equity Builds Expertise framework. And after years of helping teachers, school leaders, engineers, and technical teams grow their people, I've learned something pretty simple. And that's that classrooms and companies face some of the same challenges. And it's the same solutions that can actually change everything. So here, we're going to talk about what really builds expertise. We're going to talk about belonging, access, clarity, agency, and communication, and the everyday decisions that shape how people learn and collaborate. So if you're committed to growing people, whether we're talking about students and staff, teachers or engineers, this is the podcast for you. So go grab a chair, pull up and grab your notebook and help me as we engage in those conversations that ensure that we are bridging STEM education and STEM industry and really focusing on what is going to build expertise that lasts. This is Equity Builds Expertise, the podcast. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Equity Builds Expertise podcast, because whether you teach it or build it, expertise grows where equity leads. So I want to start with something kind of small, maybe not so small at all. I'm wearing my favorite t-shirt. Not sure you can see it. Let me stand up a little bit. All right. And my favorite t-shirt says, "Never forget 1930 to 2006. And it has this nice big picture of Pluto on it. Now, every time I wear this t-shirt, someone always laughs, but then they actually pause, right? Because we all remember where we were. I know I'm dating myself. We all remember where we were when Pluto got reclassified, right? One day it was a planet. That's what we learned. That's what we were taught. And that's what we knew. And then all of a sudden it wasn't a planet. And it has nothing to do about Pluto. It's not because Pluto changed, but because our understanding of it did. And if I'm honest, that moment has stayed with me. And it's not because of all the astronomy about it, but because of what it actually represents. How hard it is to let go of something that we've held as true for years. It also represents how uncomfortable it is to update our thinking in real time. How quickly we can move from something that we're certain about to then all of a sudden questioning everything. So in the last episode, we started with a shift, right? We were rethinking how expertise actually develops and why design matters even more than talent. But today we're going to take that same idea into one of the biggest conversations happening right now, AI. And just like Pluto, I think we're in a moment where the conversation is shifting way faster than our understanding. But it's shifting not from the angle that you usually hear. And that's not what we're going to talk about in this episode. So in this episode, I'm joined by Michael Taubman and Scott Kern. And what really stood out to me in this conversation is how they reframed everything. So they're not talking about should we use AI or is AI cheating? But they're talking about, are we actually teaching people how to think with it? Because access without understanding is not expertise. And new tools without new ways of thinking just recreate some of those same old gaps. So on this episode, they introduce their AI driver's license framework. And we start to unpack what it looks like to build real competence and not just access. So maybe this episode is less about AI and really more about whether we're willing to do what that Pluto moment asked us, which is to revisit what we thought we knew and to redesign how we move forward because of it. So let's get into it. Well, thank you both for being here. I'm super excited to dive right into a lot of the work that you've been doing, both through your roles at Uncommon Schools, but also a lot through the work that you do as co-founders of Sparked Education. So I wanted to start with some of the writing. Both of you have been writing up a storm on a lot of different platforms. Michael, your writing consistently pushes back against that panic driven responses that people have to AI in education in particular. And from your perspective, what are we getting wrong?
Yeah, great question. And thank you for having us, by the way. It's really exciting to be here. I think, as you kind of said in your question, there's a spectrum that gets established too quickly, I think, in a lot of cases, based on that panic you're talking about, that goes to either extreme. Either everything is different now, nothing about the way school was is true anymore, or we can't let this near school. We need to put our heads in the sand, lock the doors, and keep AI out. And as a mentor of all of ours, Jamie Verrilli once put
Mm,
it,
yes.
education is all about the both and. We need to find a way to work responsibly with AI. We need to make sure we also preserve practices that we know are good for kids and good for learning that we need to bring
Mhm,
into the AI era. And so I think the
mhm,
first mistake we make a lot of the time is due to that sense of panic, that sense of falling behind, of FOMO, or of feeling overwhelmed, we kind of split ourselves into these two camps instead of finding that place in the middle where we take the best of what both those mindsets have to offer and think about a
mhm,
path forward in that space.
mhm. Well, what are the concerns that you think are actually valid, though?
Yeah, I mean, it would be naive to say this wasn't a moment when the way we've done education is being challenged. I
Hmm.
think it's raising profound questions. I taught English for 18
Mhm,
years before moving into
mhm,
what I teach now,
mhm.
and writing an essay is now a
Mm.
different kind of activity in this moment. And Scott can talk a lot more about that in his class.
Mm. Yep.
But I think like we are correct to see that this is raising questions about what it means to do education, what it means to learn.
Mhm,
I think the issue though is that if we get underneath those initial concerns, there are first principles about learning that are perennial. And that
mm.
it's almost like an active translation where we need to find how to bring those perennial ways of thinking about education into this moment.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
think that the idea that an essay assignment is now something different
Hmm.
is true. The idea that thinking coherently and getting your thoughts into words and going through the process of organizing your thoughts and presenting them to an audience, that's all still, again, perennially true. It's just what does that look like now? And so, for example, I've seen educators talking a lot about process, which I'm sure Scott can
Mhm,
talk about too, where it's about the writing process more and more, not the product. But the idea of
mhm,
organizing your thoughts and finding the
mhm.
right words for your thoughts remains essential.
Yep. How does, though, that fear limit good teaching and good decisions that teachers make?
Yeah, I mean, partly fear is a leads to looking away.
Mm,
I think fear is a
mhm,
form of denial
mhm,
in a certain sense, or
mhm,
it's related to denial. And I think that
mhm.
one of the problems is that we need to engage with this technology enough so that we can understand what's happening and then decide using our judgment as educators,
Yeah,
not using AI's judgment, using our judgment as educators, what are the implications for how we teach or how our schools work? And if
yeah.
we operate from a place of fear, I think it's hard to go through that learning process we need to go through to make the judgment calls that are necessary right now.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that in your Substack articles that is something that I think you do really well, Mike, and that is that you almost do a think aloud through your articles, right? And there's a moment where you're talking about here, okay, so here's what I did yesterday, or here's what I'm doing tomorrow, here's the lesson, but you also tell us or show us where's that point that you need to turn off AI, where you need to stop the AI's work for you as a tool and turn on your own brains or turn on your own thinking, both as a teacher and then as a student. And I think what's important is how to train teachers to do that level of thinking. And I love that you're doing it through your Substack, but I also know, Scott, that that's something that you also do and have done in your classroom. And in your LinkedIn articles, you talk a lot about, like, so here's the result when you do this, and here's how I did it. I would love for you to just elevate a little bit more an example of what really having AI work as the tool in the way that it should, what the results of that can be for students, and what it was like for you as an educator to even think about using AI in that way.
Yeah, it it was honestly the start of it was a lot of conversations with Mike about AI, what it means, how it can enter the classroom,
Yeah.
but mostly it was about not upending what I'm doing in the classroom, but using AI in a way that can support at key moments students in particular my class in the writing process.
Yeah.
And it's funny that we were talking about process because that's exactly what I was thinking. Like a product is finite, but the
Mm,
process is
yes.
durable. Like that's something that kids will carry with them over and over. So what I've done with my work with AI in the classroom is have students do the normal writing cycle as we've always taught it
Hmm.
on the front end. And
Yeah.
then during the revision process, think about how AI can come in to give kids a lot more feedback than I could on my own. The way I like to think
That.
of it when I'm talking to educators is the sort of the old way that I and a lot of us used to teach when we were reteaching. We've got a whole ton of skills that we know some kid struggles with, but
Mm-hmm.
we've got to find that like best fit gap.
That's right.
What's going to help the largest number of students in my room? Because I can really only teach to everyone one thing over again and then let
Mm-hmm.
them practice. But knowing that like there are kids on either side of that best fit gap that aren't going to get quite what they need. There are high flyers who that's not a skill they're struggling with. They're beyond that. There are
That's right.
strugglers who they're not even there yet. They need more help just to get to that sort of middle ground there. With AI, I've used bots to come
Yeah.
in
Yes.
and like target precisely where kids are struggling. So I built a bot to it has their score. So I score all of their essays. I put all the task in there, the exemplar in there, the student scores, and all of their essays. So when a student types their name in, their
Mm.
score pops up and the bot guides them to the part of the essay where they're struggling.
Wow.
So I know then that like every student is getting that like that gap is them. So that like best fit gap, every kid is getting that. Plus, I'm still, doing my million laps around the classroom, checking in with everyone. I can spend more time with the strugglers, a little bit more time with the high flyers to push them. And it's almost made me a copy of me, sort of sprinkled around the
Yeah.
classroom
Yeah.
that can just give students way more feedback. And at first it was kind of strange, but it was like it became clear to students very quickly that this was helping everyone. And now I can point back to last year and say, last year's group had the highest scores ever. We know that this works. We're going to keep trying these tools, over and over again in class.
Wow. What you have just, there were a couple of things that I wrote down. Um, First of all, just starting off with the not upending the lesson and how that, I think, is one of the greatest fears, going back to what we started talking about, that teachers have, right? I don't have capacity to learn this new thing. I don't have capacity to change. I don't have room, especially you're teaching AP class. I don't have room to change how I operate. I've been getting decent scores for X number of years following the same system. Some kids pass, some kids don't. Some kids get fives and fours, some kids don't. That's just the way it is. I don't have time to do this, right? You have figured out a way to basically, yes, multiply yourself, but provide a version of private tutoring. But you're doing this for every single student in your class. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That is really, really powerful and important for all students to have access to. I would love to know from just each of you, like, how did you learn all of this?
Mike, did you? I can't remember which of us took the course first, or maybe we
Mm,
took it at the same time.
No, I think
I,
you went first. You did it first. Play Lab, right?
yeah, so some colleagues
uh,
of ours at our campus had
yeah.
we were offered a PLC from a group called PlayLab,
Hmm.
and uh, I didn't know what it was. They sort of sent out an email, and I was like, I don't have time for this. Who has time for this? This is crazy. And like after I think the first session or the second session, our colleagues were like, you got to do this. And so they explained briefly, what it was about. And my first session of going there, within 5 or 10 minutes, they had me in building a bot. And I was blown away. I was just like, this is insane. And like
Hmm.
most people, Mike's mind probably went to even more interesting places, but mine was like, how can this help me as a curriculum writer? How can this help me prepare for class? All of
Yeah.
these things to augment my work outside the classroom. And that's how I kind of started. But I'd be curious to hear from Mike because he's coming at this from a totally different angle, and I bet his thinking was different.
Um, well, it's similar, definitely in the sense of we heard about this thing called Play Lab, and they're a great resource for anybody who's curious about learning more about this. Is they do a lot of workshops for teachers, etc. Um, but I think to back up for a sec, yeah, you put it really well, Shauna. That there's often this feeling of like not another thing, not another
Hmm.
new thing. Come on, like I've been doing this a long time. I remember in the 2000s this came in, and in the teens this came in, and the 90s this came in. And one of the confusing things about this moment, I think, for some educators is that is true about education. There are pendulum swings, there are things that come and go, but some things don't come and go. They just come and stay. Almost every educator in the country has laptops in their room and has a Google Classroom set up or some kind of learning management system. And at some point, they learn to operate the learning management system. And they learn to troubleshoot a kid's laptop in class, and they learn to grade on digital platforms, et cetera.
Yeah.
Laptops aren't going. So there are moments
That's
when
true.
something arrives in education that we do need to wrestle with and reckon with. And this is one of those moments. And the way we've been talking about it in the trainings we run is that this is like cars just got invented. Like when cars
Yeah.
were invented
Yeah.
100 years ago, at the
Hmm.
beginning, at a certain point, you could be like, all right, I like my horse and buggy. What's this new thing? They get stuck in the mud more often. They're always braking. I like my horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at some point at the sort of start of the 20th century, Scott's the history teacher, he can get into the details, but this went from being a sort of interesting new tech, is this going to come and go, to reshaping daily life on
Hmm.
Earth. Like
Hmm.
our cities got redesigned around it. I'm living in New York, and Robert Moses, rebuilt New York for the car. And now we have gas stations everywhere, and we think of learning how to drive as a almost like a civic act. Like
Yes.
you haven't come of age until you learn to drive. And again, being from New York, I know a lot of New Yorkers who don't drive, and it's a funny joke because everybody drives, and so only the New Yorkers don't. Our
Hmm.
kids are graduating right now into a world where cars were invented. And if
Hmm.
that's the case, it is incumbent upon us as educators to learn how these things work, to get
Hmm.
behind the wheel, figure out how to
Yes.
drive, and then help our kids learn how to drive too. That does not mean they have to drive all the time. Plenty of people
That's
know how
right.
to drive and choose not to, and good for them.
Yeah.
But they have a license and they could do it if they need to. And we're aware that you can't totally function anymore if you can't get in a car when push comes to shove. We want our kids to have that choice, just like we want to give them all these different choices. So for me, that was one of the mindsets that I think I started to have early on was this is bigger than an education pendulum swing. This is a societal pivot moment in history. And like we always do in education, we want our kids to be ready for this new world.
That talks a lot to access, which you know is something that I strongly MO. That's why I do what I do. It's because students need to have access um, in multiple ways, especially to STEM content, STEM careers. I want to talk a little bit about the other side of access, which is gatekeeping. And one of the patterns that I see, and whether we're talking about grading or curriculum or now AI, is that systems that are often meant to support learning can eventually become gatekeepers. And so, where do you see AI widening opportunity? And then, where do you also see the risk of it turning into a narrowing of access?
The data right now says it's widening existing inequity gaps, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Um, so we all do this work because we believe in equity and access. AI has the potential because almost every student out there has technology available to them in the classroom. Many schools are now one-to-one. I think it's possible that AI tools could narrow the gap. But the what we're saying with the AI driver's license is that we want students to be drivers. We want them to have agency in what's coming. And the quickest way to ensure that like inequity gaps stop existing is to give kids the skills and the tools that they need when they go out into the world that they can choose their own destination and then successfully get there using everything that they've taught and how they think about the world. And so we're trying to close that gap by thinking of how we can empower kids to choose when to use AI and when not to. And that AI isn't just a tool, it's a topic. It's something that you have to think about and have a personal ethos about in order to know when you're out in the world when it's useful and when it might be undermining where you're trying to go or how you're trying to get there to keep that car metaphor going.
You know,
Yeah,
I jump in
sorry.
quickly. Sorry.
Yeah.
Your question made me think about something we started with earlier, which is that spectrum that education can kind of fall into right now of like full embrace, like total school redesign from the ground up, and like never in my school. There's a similar spectrum in terms of gatekeeping potential and sort of lack of access potential on either side. Overuse of AI is
Mhm.
going to come at a cost, and underuse of AI is going to come at a cost. And what we're saying by that is there are going to be students out there who outsource their learning, who offload their thinking onto these systems, and are no longer able to show up in a room with no tech and be the most impressive person in the room. And that's what we want for our
Mhm.
kids. At the
Yes.
same time, when they walk in that room fully prepared, incredibly well educated, and just like embodying a sense of confidence, all that,
Yeah.
someone else in that room has all that and also learned how to prompt, learned how to use
Yes.
a project, learned how to use Claude Code. We want our students to have access on both ends.
Yeah.
They know on their own 2 feet what they need to know about the world and how to talk about it and engage and argue and debate. And at the same time, they know when to pull these systems in. And I think that balance is going to be really crucial to avoid the gatekeeping that you were mentioning.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I love that. And I think you're right. I think you're right. And I'm starting to see some professors that are pushing students in that way. I mean, you two are great examples of teachers doing that right now. But I will say that, so my twins, they are in a dual enrollment program. And the new semester just started this week, and my son's class, which is I think it's intro to film or history of film, something along those lines. That professor said they are not allowed to use any devices in his class. So no recording because I immediately was like, "Oh, great! You could record your record your lessons or listen to the professor later." Um, they have to take notes. They show up with a notebook. They engage in discussions. And in fact, it was 45 minutes into the first class when Mally said no one was taking notes. They were just engaging in the discussion. He had shown them the clip of a German film, M. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's supposedly very well known, like a classic. And they had a great discussion around it. And the professor said, "This will be on your midterm." No one. He said no one. There were like 70 kids in the class. He said no one was taking notes. It was a lesson on first, we got to figure out how to take notes when we're engaging in this discussion and watching movies and watching film. But now they're starting to realize that there's more value sometimes in just minds on, and that you don't have to rely because they did grow up very attached to devices. But how do we prevent AI literacy from becoming just another way or another form of academic tracking?
I think one way is to think of AI literacy. Well, it's almost like you're taking the AI part out. So what we're
Mm,
thinking about
mm,
is that the AI isn't the limiting factor. So just for example, you were talking about an analog class from a professor. The first full unit of our AI literacy program is analog. There's no technology at all. So students are thinking about what matters to them, what
mm,
problems are out there in their community or in their family or in their friend group, and
mhm,
how they can go about solving those problems. And then AI enters the picture to potentially help them solve that problem. And then along the way, students will explore where AI is successful, where it's not, how to question output, all the different skills that
mm,
we would think of there. But in that way, it's a class that speaks to anyone because
mm,
it's aimed at you as a person. And then you take what matters to you and the problem you want to solve. And then AI is part of a tool that helps you get there. It's the car that helps you
mm,
get there. As Mike says, you in the car didn't have a discussion about where to go. You
mm.
chose where to go, and the
Yeah.
car took you there. And AI is the same thing. You're in control. You rely on what you know and what you care
Mhm.
about. You think about how it can help you solve problems out there in the world. And then through this course and through teachers everywhere, you rely on the durable skills you have to get there in hopefully in a way where AI will help you get there and not undermine it along the way. And so I think that speaks to every student out there. And so we're launching our AI literacy program, and we only have 20 slots, but it's open to all the seniors. And so we're both sort of
Wow.
on the edge of our seats thinking about, what what group of students are we going to have sign up? And it's kind of exciting to think about just, a wide spectrum of student experiences in the class. And I think that will only make it stronger and help us figure out how to make it even better.
Wow. That's fantastic. Do you plan on offering any kind of summer intensive around that? Getting ahead of myself here.
Yes, for both students and either educators and also
Yeah.
parents who are interested in learning more about this as their students are in school or going off to college. So
Oh
we'll
my
be
goodness.
putting out more information about all three of those possibilities.
I love it. Please don't forget to send that my way either.
But for just a general audience, for anybody listening, some basic steps we recommend that we run in a lot of these trainings is number one, it is worth it to pay for one of these. It's 20
Mm,
bucks a month. If you can't do that, obviously it's fine without that. But if possible, you want to get the paid version of GPT, Claude, or Gemini.
yep.
You can
Yep.
pick one. Number two, you want to start using it at random moments when you like wouldn't necessarily think about AI. I've made AI burgers at home quite a bit. I'm working on my
Me
cooking.
too. Yep.
And what I'll
Yep.
do is I'll say to the AI, these are the ingredients I have.
Mm-hmm.
Take me through this burger process step by step. And then you want to try to the functionalities these things have. So I'm making the burgers and then I take a picture with my phone of the burgers or of the as the mixture or whatever, and I upload it to the AI and I say, how's it looking? And it's like, leave them on for one more minute. You want the brown to be a little more
Wow.
crust. And by doing things like that,
Yeah.
that helps everybody, but especially if you're an educator who's sort of tentative about this. It's a low stakes environment, but you learn really quickly how these things work and how you work with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then one more thing that I think is crucial for everybody to know is that the first time you talk to these things, they are not going to give you exactly what you need. And so what you have to do is say to it, even when I was making the burgers, I said, here's what I have. It said, great, put in 4 tablespoons of this. And I was like, no, no, I don't even have a tablespoon thing. It's in the dishwasher. Give me a backup plan. But
Yeah.
there's always going to be something it's misunderstanding. And when you
Yeah.
go back and forth with it, even for a minute or two, it starts to understand what you need and it becomes a tool that's much more useful. And so I think if people did that for about, this might sound like a lot, but 10 hours total, doesn't have to be 10
Mm-hmm.
hours at once, obviously, but like
Yeah.
over time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, then by the end of that process, you are in a place where you're ready to bring this into your classroom with academic tools.
I want to talk a little bit about assessments. I would love to know, how should assessments shift in response to AI?
I think this is one of the fears, right? This is just
Mm-hmm.
going to the back at the very beginning. I've read that there was a surge in, remember the blue books in college? That yes, there's a surge in whatever company makes those is it's just rolling in it all of a sudden because a lot of
Like,
colleges are
that's it.
going
You're gonna
back
write
to
right in front of me.
Forget
handwritten
NVIDIA. Everybody buys stock
assignments.
in blue books.
That's right. That's right.
Mm.
Also, like a resurgence of oral exams. So I don't know. Part of my thinking on this is like we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like we, in some cases, maybe not for the best reasons, but we've moved towards a lot of the assessment structures that we have for good reasons along the way. And rather than thinking about like, oh, we need to make a massive shift so that AI doesn't disrupt this, just to sort of slow down. Mike had an article recently where he said speed up to slow down, and
Yes.
that really resonated with me. This idea, like, okay, well, no, let's slow down and really think about what we're doing here. So what we really mean is, you mentioned cognitive offloading earlier, and
Yes.
the way I always think about it is productive struggle. It's like we want to like really hone in on those moments of productive struggle because that's what really helps kids learn to like push
Mm-hmm.
through intellectually challenging things and keep going. And of course, the worry is that AI is going to undermine that. But if we think about where the productive struggle is happening in any given assessment,
Mm-hmm.
then we can figure out where AI might be a part of that and where it might not.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to go back to the writing example, like I want students to be able to come up with their own ideas,
Mm-hmm.
gather their own evidence, make their own arguments, put a draft onto paper, and go through that whole writing process on their own. To me, that's where like the real productive struggle happens. But then there's a chance for revision. There's a chance to improve. And when a AI tool could come into play, my bot gives them steps that they should
Mm-hmm.
take to get the point, and then questions they should ask themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just repeating the same thing that we would do as teachers, which is putting kids
That's right.
back in the productive struggle, getting them to turn inward, think about what they already know, what are the steps that they could use to improve on something that they've already done.
Yeah.
And the AI helps sort of get that process for each student in a way that they need, but it's not an answer generator. And to go back to the process point, kids don't use it that way. After they use the bot, I can see all the chat logs. They
Mm.
do not go in there and say, you know, I need a piece of evidence from 1840 to 1890 about westward expansion. They don't do that. They legitimately spar with the AI tool to get better. And part of the reason is because we're saying your score in this lesson is based on process. How many times have you engaged in a revision in this? It's not based on what's your final score on the rubric. And so kids have internalized then that the bot is there as a process tool. It's not undermining productive struggle. And in fact, when they get to the next round where there's no AI involved at all, and they're going to write that essay by themselves for a first draft, it's better. And it's better because AI came in at crucial moments that were chosen by the teacher, by me, to not undermine the productive struggle.
Run a career exploration purpose development program. So it's a chance for seniors and juniors to start figuring out what they want to do with their lives, what's calling them after college. There's a reason not just to go to college, but to finish college. They know why they're choosing the major they are, et cetera. AI is a huge boon to anybody doing career connected work in that way, because before this, a student would say, I want to be an architect. And I would say, fantastic. And then I would try very hard to find them an architect to talk to because I studied English in college. They still need to talk to architects. That's actually a crucial, even more important skill now in the AI age, is the ability to message somebody, get on a call, talk to them, look them in the eye, in the camera or in real life. But now, while they're waiting for that architect to get back to them on LinkedIn, again, we take a picture of their drawing and upload it to AI and say, give this architectural feedback. And lo and behold, one student last week didn't have vanishing points in their image. So the image didn't look three-dimensional. And that's not something that would occur to him or me. And he would have kept drawing the same kind of drawings, which are great. But then the AI was like, well, you need vanishing points. So then he went down a vanishing point rabbit hole. And he was looking at videos about this, practicing. And when he does meet with that architect, he can talk about the process of discovering vanishing points. And then fast forward to the end of the year, the product in my mind in a class like that, which is different than a traditional academic class in some ways, is that they stand and deliver about themselves and their journey with confidence, having practiced a ton, that they are looking at notes, but no AI is coaching them. They're in that moment, sharing with friends and family and community why they want to be an architect, what they're going to study in college, what they're going to do in architecture school. And they also talk about how AI brought them to that moment, when they used it, when they didn't, what they think about AI and architecture. Because then, again, to Scott's point, it's about them. And they are the stars of this show. And just because AI is on the scene does not mean it's the main character right now. The students are the main characters, and they just need to learn how to interact with this new technology.
I love that. I love that. You're also creating an early access to something that students are interested in that is building their self-efficacy and their belief that they are capable of becoming an architect, even when they may not know one yet or see one that looks like them yet, right? Like that is an amazing, amazing strategy that is like a way to dismantle the gatekeeping in STEM in particular. And you talk about architecture, you talk about a lot of these fields that students, especially students of color, students in different marginalized communities, don't necessarily have access to. And you have found a way to not only multiply yourself, but also multiply access to a lot of these careers early on.
Yeah. And
That's
to me,
pretty
and
amazing.
it's
Yeah.
almost double ungatekeeping, because number one, to your point,
Yeah.
now Mackay is thinking about architecture, and
Yes.
this is a great opportunity for him.
Yes.
But two, and so he's getting it until he gets the real architect on LinkedIn. He's got the pretend architect via AI. But
Mm-hmm.
to access the pretend architect via AI, he has to do basic prompting, which
That's
is what
right.
he needs to do in any context moving forward. So, for example, he knows to say to the AI, you are an architect. I am trying to draw a floor plan of a house. I would like feedback on my floor plan. Like, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people don't even realize that you have to say all those things to the AI. You can't just take the picture and upload it. You have to take the picture, upload it, and write very specific things.
Mm-hmm.
He knows how to do that too. So now when he gets to architecture school, he's been living and breathing this for years, has developed mentorships and networks. And also when they're like, okay, here's our AI tool for our architecture firm, he's like, oh, AI tool. I've been doing this for 6 years. And so he
Yeah.
has double access that might have been gate kept otherwise.
That's right. That's right. How long have you been doing this program now, Mike?
This is the 5th year of, it's
The
called the Summit
fifth.
program. And it's now we have probably on our 350th student in the program this year.
Wow. Have you kept in touch with all of the students or former students and heard about the impact it has had or how they may have used what they've learned from their experiences in high school, now in college?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that brings me great joy is when they show up on LinkedIn without being told to in class. They're in college and all of a sudden there they are on LinkedIn and using best practices there. Again, speaking of gatekeeping, teaching them how to use that tool in high school so that when they get to college, they know more than their peers about it. They're not scrambling to keep up. And
Hmm.
so you see them using LinkedIn. And then, yeah, there'll definitely be sort of anecdotal testimonials around, when I designed the logo for our program, because every year a different student designs the logo who wants to be a graphic designer or artist.
Really?
We keep the logo the same kind of symbolism is in there, but they choose how to show it.
Nice.
So Amaris a few years ago designed the logo, and she wants to be an artist. She ended up going to Syracuse, where she's studying art right now.
Nice.
And I saw her recently, and she was saying at that moment when she designed the logo was one of the first times, as I understood her, that she had seen her work publicly on the back of all these sweatshirts all over the school because we put it on sweatshirts. And she said, that was a moment for her where she realized, to your point, who she could
Yeah.
be.
Oh,
And I think there's a lot of that going on where even just that moment, the other day I had a student, with permission, of course, head out of school, a senior, to a local beauty supply entrepreneurship store because she wants to
yeah.
be a beauty entrepreneur. She wants to run some kind of wellness beauty store. So there's a lot of them nearby. She walked down to one, walked in, introduced herself, and now this woman is hopefully going to be her mentor.
Oh,
And so she
wow.
sees herself literally in that space. And the same with STEM fields. We have students visiting scientific labs. We have students visiting consulting firms. And the more they're in those spaces, the more I think they can see themselves there.
That's powerful. That's powerful.
I think the moments like that, I mean, this is specifically a career connected learning class, but just in general, moments where they are having real life experiences
Hmm.
in any content, I think that's
Hmm.
more and more important now because AI
Hmm.
creates the feeling that you're having an experience,
Yes. Yeah.
but you're not.
Hmm.
It's a series of verbal interactions with a prediction machine. You're not talking to an architect. And then we have to make
Hmm.
sure students know how to use it to get what they need from it, but also remember then you need to go find the architect. Then you need to go to that store.
Hmm.
Then you need to go to the
Hmm.
museum and
Hmm.
look at art for real. And I think that, as you were saying earlier, these screens are all around us now. With AI, it'll be even more so. It's going to become a an advantage for students to have real life experiences, and I think schools and educators need to prioritize those.
Really want to focus on like what does responsible implementation of AI look like in real conditions?
Yeah. Um, I think one of the things that Mike is getting at and that we're talking about here is that people who are best at using AI are people who are experts in their field using it to do things within their field. Because
Mm.
then they know if it's good at something or it's not, because that's their expertise.
Hmm.
And so I think what that speaks to is there's all sorts of like endpoint EdTech AI tools, and I think a lot of them are super helpful. But the
Hmm.
bottom line is that like teachers need to be out there in front with AI in their classrooms because they are going to be the ones that know what actually works for kids and what doesn't.
Hmm.
And so I think responsible AI use, first and foremost, means experienced teachers learning about AI and how it works, and then using it in ways that support student learning without undermining thinking. And it's the expert teachers that are going to know how to do that. And we talked earlier about sort of a generational gap.
Mm.
And that's why I think that generational gap is like very worrisome to me. Because what that means, if that's true, and the data says that it is, that as age goes up, like with all technologies,
Yeah.
use goes down. That
Hmm.
means that like the most experienced, the most trusted teachers out there are the ones who are least using these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that speaks to like teacher training
Okay.
and like the need to be open-minded and need to work with colleagues and be prepared to try things in your class in ways that you think will support student learning, but then pivot if
Mm-hmm.
they don't. Experienced
Mm-hmm.
teachers, like Mike said, have been through a pendulum of different things that have swung in and out of education. So they know how to try something, and if it doesn't work, how to move away from it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that like that is key, is like it means that the most experienced teachers in the building are the ones that school leaders should want sort of leading the way, and the ones that they
Mm-hmm.
should try to get on board with learning what it is and then deciding for themselves based on their experience where it does or it doesn't make sense in their classroom. And that might be different for every school and it might be different for every teacher.
I
But the
love that.
idea that because it's new, because it could undermine learning, which it
Yeah.
absolutely could, that
Yeah.
then we just want to entirely not use it, I think is not a solution that's going to be helpful for kids.
Like a few rules of thumb we've discovered in our work is number one, guided practice is still crucial. And this is a skill that you can teach. So I pull up the AI on the screen and I show them what I'm doing. And then I do a think aloud, then I do a turn and talk, then I do a check for understanding, then we do a we do, then we do a you do. And all those things that teachers know how to do, it works for this too. So you don't have to be a computer science major, you don't have to work at OpenAI to teach
Mm-hmm.
AI. That's number
Mm-hmm.
one, is just to have that awareness, that confidence as a teacher, this is just a little bit of content, and then you know how to teach it. Number two, we've found that 20% is about the maximum amount of time any period should be spent on AI. Even
Mm.
in an AI literacy class, as Scott was saying earlier, we're going to be teaching this AI literacy pilot next semester
Yeah.
at our school coming up. The kids are not going to be on AI as much as it might sound like they're going to be. The first unit is there's no screens, basically. So I
Mm.
think for educators who are like feeling like this is going to take over the room, if you have a 45-minute period, you shouldn't use it more than about 10, 15 minutes max. Often they're on there for like 5 minutes sometimes with me, and then we close it and move on. So that's number two. And then number three, I think going back to what we were saying earlier, you just want to get the basics down yourself. There's
Yeah.
things that we're going to be putting materials out about this. We've mentioned some of them on this call here, but all you have to do is use it enough to be comfortable and then bring
Yeah.
it in the room and then work with the kids from that. Don't You don't have to be the expert. You can come to them in humility and say, I'm figuring this out with you. And if you do that with guided practice and with a sense that this is just about 20% of class, I think that's a great place to start. I think you wouldn't want to use it every day,
Yeah.
20% of the time. I think you'd want to use it and then have some time to reflect and have students experience class without it again. So I think
Mm-hmm.
you'd want to alternate days. You'd want to go to about 20% of the time. And then I
Mm-hmm.
think the key is to know what you're using it for. If they're
Mm-hmm.
just open, an AI tool, you could spend a lot of time that's not
Mm.
very well used.
Yeah.
But if you say, for example, what I've done is I've said, okay, we're going to go into this and it's going to help you take a quick career personality test and then give you a scenario based on the outcome to help you really imagine what career might interest you.
Yeah.
We're going to do that for about 4 minutes. Then you're walking around, circulating, looking at what's happening. Okay, close the laptop,
Mm-hmm.
turn and talk, and all the normal teaching things kick in. And we know why we're doing it, as opposed to open AI. And now let's half an hour later, let's see where we are.
Yeah, and just to give a different example that I think follows the same general principle is like discussion and inquiry is at the heart of humanities and history classes. And I would never let AI touch that. That to
Mm.
me, that anything that's peer to peer or whole group is like sacred space that should be technology free. But that doesn't mean that AI couldn't play a role in it. So ways that I've used it in my class then is to have students who have prepped for a seminar spar with an AI, with
Oh.
their arguments before the discussion, then check in with a partner. Then we have our class discussion. There's no AI involved in any of that. And then at the back end, they spar again. And often what I'll have an AI bot do is just give them an alternative. Well, what
Mm.
about this? What do you think of this idea? Why is yours a better idea than this one? And it's just one more sort of little push for students. It kept the discussion and the face-to-face interaction sacred, but it also then came in before and after to kind of push kids a little bit, just to think a little bit more. And of course, then those ideas kind of seeped into the discussion as well.
Wow. That is awesome. I mean, the neuroscience behind that. So now that's just multiple ways to build expertise around that content that they're working on and prepping for because their brain is now having these multiple opportunities to debate and to see different perspectives from different lenses and to argue against it. It's going to trigger the hippocampus to say this is important enough to remember. This is how you build expertise. I love everything that you're doing. This is awesome.
You're
How
you're
do
naming
we?
all the science that I don't understand, but I'm glad
No,
to hear all of that's true.
Chat GPT it. You got it. What should students leave school understanding about AI?
Going back to Scott's point earlier, the first thing we have to understand is that it's a tool and a topic. That
Ooh,
you need to know how to use this, and you also need to understand that this is a historical event you are living through. And
wow.
if they understand both those things, they're already in a really powerful place in terms of these conversations, because a lot of people fall in one camp or the other. And we want students to know how to use it. I'll get back to in a sec. And then also just to engage with it in again, like if cars were just invented, or
Mm,
take cars today, as cars are
yeah,
currently, are cars a net positive or not? It's a great conversation to have. There are a lot of downsides to cars. There are a lot of positives to cars. It's a rite of passage in our society to get your permit, to get your license. You know how many times students run in the room with their permit? They're so excited. But we can talk about the impact of cars on America.
mhm.
So we can talk about the impact of AI on America and on the world. And so I think them having that conversation, which again is a humanities conversation in a lot of ways, is really important. And I want to make sure humanities educators feel like this is something that not just that you can do, that you need to do, because that we are the ones who are trained to have those conversations with students. But then back to the tool part of it, in the driver's license framework that we were mentioning earlier, to us, the key is to know that it starts before AI with you having a destination. What do you want to
Mhm.
get out of this? What do you want to accomplish? What's your purpose in that moment? Could be a
Yeah.
small purpose, make some AI burgers, but you have a purpose. Number two, know how to prompt it, know how to engage with these tools. There's also the prompting techniques, context engineering, uploading various documents and saying, just focus on these. Don't look at the whole internet. Just focus on what I gave you.
Mhm.
But then that's the second part is how to use it, how to drive the car. The third part is open the hood. How is this working? What are tokens? What is model
Mhm.
temperature? How is it the case that most of the time when you're using these models, given the way they're built, you're more likely to get something people have done before?
That's right.
By definition, these
That's
things
right.
are going to tell you what is the most probable thing based on what everybody did before. What does that say about your capacity to be original with these?
Mm.
That's the kind of conversation they need to be having while they also know how to upload a photo and prompt in these ways. And
Yeah,
finally, to engage in these conversations after having done all that about, again, the implications. I
that's
know what
right.
transformer architecture is now. I know how to prompt. I know what this did for me and didn't do for me. What do I think this means for when I get to college? What is my stance on AI in healthcare?
Yes.
And if they leave school with those four things, knowing that it starts with them, knowing how to use AI tools, knowing how AI tools work, and then engaging in a broader societal conversation, in our mind, they're then ready to earn their driver's license and
Mm.
operate these machines.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and the sum of all that is that then students are drivers, they're not
Yeah.
passengers.
Yeah.
Like the metaphor that a lot of people are using that we don't think is right is that AI is a wave. Waves happen to you. You don't have agency. They buffet you around. But if AI is cars, you can be a driver. And
That's
so
right.
you can be in control of what's happening. And if students leave feeling empowered with the four
Mhm.
things Mike said and feeling like drivers, then we feel like they're ready for a world that, we don't know what AI is going to bring, but the beautiful thing about that is if they have those four things and they know that they have agency in the world,
Yeah.
then it doesn't matter what those things bring. They can respond to those in a way that's personal and important for them, and they can help them get to where they want to go.
What responsibility do you think both industry and education share here when it comes to AI?
Say, starting with industry, we saw what happened with social media.
Mm.
We've run this experiment already.
Mhm.
And all three of us and everybody listening to this knows all about the outcomes. We need to do better this time. And Tristan Harris has a great TED talk about this that I recommend to everybody. But he kind of gets into this: what do we learn from social media, and what can we take into us into the AI world? Industry needs to be humble about the powers they're unleashing and prioritize, especially speaking as an educator, but as a parent too, prioritize the welfare of the most vulnerable and the youngest and take steps to make that happen. And I think some companies are doing better than others, and there's a lot we can get into there. But I think from the industry perspective, we did this already.
Yeah.
So we do not have the luxury or honestly the ethical out of saying who knew.
Yeah.
And I really hope the people making these decisions are coming at it from that perspective.
Yeah, to that point about humility, I would say industry needs to recognize that they're not the experts of young people or the experts of education. That's teachers, that's educators. So there needs to be some recognition about who to go to when it comes to, how these tools can interact with kids and how they might end up in schools. And that should be for educators and schools to decide, not industry. Regardless of how many experts they bring on board, the people who are on the ground with kids every day, they're the ones who are really going to understand how the tools can work well, and they're the ones who should be making those decisions.
I love that. You're right. You're
I
absolutely
think
right.
going back to the education part quickly, to me, has always been about the world as it is and the world as it could be. And we've always wanted our students to be able to see both, to be ready for the world that is. We owe that to them, we owe that to their families, but they are hungry to make a better world and to make the world that they know could be. And I think education needs to look at AI from that perspective and say, okay, it's here. Let's teach you how to use it, et cetera. But let's make sure that when you are in those seats of power, which you will be, that you make the decisions you believe are right, because we've helped you learn how to decide what you think is right and how to bring that into practice. And I think going back to the very beginning of our conversation, schools are built to do this. This is what we do, is prepare kids for the world waiting for them and prepare them to change that world.
Completely appreciate the time that you're dedicating today to be on the podcast, on the show.
Thanks for having us. It was great.
A pleasure. And Shauna, you've been an inspiration to both of us for a long time. And so we are feel fortunate as always to have a chance to talk with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So there's a line from this conversation that keeps sitting with me. Access doesn't equal understanding. And that's true far beyond AI. Whether it's a tool, a curriculum, or a role, if we don't design for thinking, we don't actually build expertise. So here's something I'd like you to sit with for a moment. Where in your classroom or on your team are people getting answers quickly, but not actually learning? And maybe even more than that, where might it be time to update what we think we know? Because just like we learned before, sometimes the shift isn't actually about the thing itself, right? It's about our understanding of it. Now, in our next episode, we're going to go even deeper into how systems shape who sees themselves in STEM. We're talking about the math person myth and how early decisions just quietly determine who continues and then who steps away from math, right? So if this episode pushed your thinking, I want you to share it with someone you're learning alongside, and just make sure that you're following the podcast by subscribing. All right, I'll see you in the next episode.